The massive space station known as the Nexus floated in the void between star systems, its crystalline spires catching the light from distant suns. For over 3,000 years, it had served as the engineering capital of the Galactic Federation, home to the brightest minds from hundreds of worlds. The station's central tower housed the most advanced computational matrix ever built, where problems that stumped entire civilizations came to be solved. Zexathera adjusted her bioluminescent patches as she walked through the pristine corridors of Tower 7. As the lead engineering coordinator for the Federation, she commanded respect from species across the galaxy. Her people, the Veltar, had mastered quantum mechanics when most worlds were still discovering fire. Yet today, she felt the weight of failure pressing down on her crystalline shoulders. The morning briefing was about to begin in Conference Hall Alpha, and Zexathera knew the topic would be the same as it had been for the past century: the Helix problem. She entered the vast chamber where holographic displays showed the rotating nightmare that had plagued galactic civilization for generations. The Helix was not a single structure, but a phenomenon that occurred in deep space. Massive energy spirals would spontaneously form in the cosmic void, spinning faster and faster until they collapsed into devastating spatial tears. These tears would rip through subspace, making faster-than-light travel impossible in entire sectors. The Federation had lost 17 colonies and countless ships to these reality-shredding events. "Status report," Zexathera announced, her voice carrying through the chamber's translation matrix. Dr. Morthkin, a spider-like being from the Arachnus Collective, stepped forward. His 8 arms manipulated holographic equations that danced in the air. "We have run another billion simulations through the Nexus core. The pattern remains consistent. Every attempt to stabilize or prevent the helix formation results in catastrophic feedback loops. The Quillian engineers tried a different approach last month," added Professor Yilnara, her slug-like form glistening under the chamber's lights. "They attempted to create counter-rotating energy fields. The result was 3 new helix formations in the outer rim." Zexathera's patches dimmed with frustration. The Federation's greatest minds had thrown everything at this problem. They had tried energy dampeners, exotic matter injections, temporal manipulation fields, and even reality-anchoring devices stolen from the extinct precursor civilization. Nothing worked. The helix formations were becoming more frequent. What started as rare cosmic events now occurred every few months. Some scientists predicted that within a century, faster-than-light travel would become impossible throughout the galaxy. Civilization would fragment. Worlds would be isolated forever. "Perhaps," suggested Dr. Corthon, a massive bear-like creature whose people specialized in brute force engineering solutions, "we should consider evacuation protocols for the next predicted formation zones." "Running away is not a solution," Zexathera replied sharply. "We need to understand why these formations occur. Every advanced civilization in our database has encountered similar phenomena. The Builders, the Shapers, the Crystal Empire, they all have records of helix-type events. All of them failed to solve it before their civilizations collapsed or evolved beyond our understanding." The chamber fell silent. The weight of history pressed upon them. How many galactic civilizations had fallen to this same problem? How many brilliant species had exhausted their knowledge trying to crack this cosmic puzzle? A soft chime echoed through the chamber. Zexathera's communication implant activated, displaying an urgent message from the Federation Council. She read it quickly, her bioluminescent patches flickering in surprise. "The humans have requested permission to study the helix problem," she announced. A ripple of confusion spread through the chamber. Dr. Morthkin's 8 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of bewilderment among his people. "The humans? But they have barely achieved interstellar travel. Their mathematics are primitive compared to ours. They still use binary computers." Professor Yilnara's antennae twitched dismissively. They have been part of the Federation for only 50 years. What could they possibly offer that we have not already tried? The humans were indeed the newest members of the Galactic Federation. Their planet, which they called Earth, had been discovered when one of their primitive chemical rockets accidentally activated an ancient jump gate left behind by the precursors. The Federation had been amazed to find a species that had developed technology so recently, yet showed such remarkable adaptability. But primitive was the key word. Human computers were laughably simple compared to the quantum biological hybrid systems used by advanced civilizations. Their mathematics, while clever, lacked the sophisticated frameworks developed by species who had been studying the universe for millions of years. Their engineering was crude, relying on mechanical solutions rather than the elegant energy manipulation favored by more evolved societies. The Council believes we should give them access, Zexathera continued reading from the message. They cite the human principle of fresh perspectives and their track record of unconventional solutions to mechanical problems. Dr. Corthon's massive frame shook with what his people considered laughter. Unconventional is certainly one word for it. I have heard their ships still use physical fuel combustion for maneuvering. They build their habitats from metal instead of growing them from living crystal. They even use solid-state computing devices that require electrical current. Their representative is already en route, Zexathera said, a female named Dr. Sarah Chen, specialist in what they call systems engineering. She will arrive within the week. The assembled beings exchanged glances that transcended species barriers. Each alien face, tentacle, or sensory organ conveyed the same sentiment: polite skepticism. The humans were enthusiastic and had shown surprising creativity in some areas, but the helix problem had stumped civilizations with millions of years more experience. Very well, Zexathera decided. We will provide full access to our research data. Perhaps their unique viewpoint will suggest some avenue we have overlooked. At the very least, it will satisfy the Council's requirement for inclusive cooperation. The meeting adjourned, and the various species dispersed to continue their individual research projects. None of them held much hope that the human would contribute anything meaningful. The helix problem had defeated the greatest minds in galactic history. What could one primitive being accomplish that they could not? 3 days later, the human transport vessel, New Horizon, docked at the Nexus. Unlike the elegant, flowing ships preferred by advanced species, the human vessel was angular and practical, bristling with communication arrays and sensor equipment. Its hull bore scorch marks and micrometeorite impacts that more sophisticated species would have prevented with energy shielding. Zexathera waited in the docking bay as the airlock cycled through its primitive mechanical sequence. When the door opened, a small figure stepped out wearing what humans called a spacesuit, an archaic pressurized garment instead of a personal atmospheric field generator. Dr. Sarah Chen was typical of her species. Bipedal, averaging height, with the peculiar hair-covered head that distinguished mammals. She carried a physical briefcase made of some kind of metal alloy, another quaint human custom. Her eyes, those strange organs that detected only a tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, looked around the docking bay with obvious wonder. "Dr. Chen," Zexathera greeted, her translation implant rendering the sounds into human-compatible audio waves. "Welcome to the Nexus. I am Zexathera, Lead Engineering Coordinator. I trust your journey was satisfactory?" The human's face contorted into what Zexathera recognized as a smile, a bizarre muscular expression that somehow conveyed friendliness among their species. "Thank you, Coordinator Zexathera. The journey was incredible. I've never seen anything like the hyperspace corridors your people use. The engineering must be extraordinary." "Indeed. Our ancestors developed the principles 12,000 years ago. I understand you wish to review our research on the helix problem?" If that's possible, I've read the basic reports that were shared with the Federation Council, but I'd love to see the detailed analysis. From what I understand, you've been working on this for about a century? 117 years, 4 months, and 16 days to be precise, Zexathera replied. We have generated over 10 billion computational models and tested thousands of theoretical solutions. The problem appears to be fundamentally unsolvable within current physical parameters. Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. That's quite a bit of data. On Earth, we have a saying, when you're stuck, step back and look at the problem from a different angle. I'm hoping that being completely outside your research tradition might let me see something you missed. Zexathara's patches dimmed slightly. The human seemed sincere but naive. How could someone with such limited knowledge see something that had escaped civilizations with knowledge spanning geological ages? Of course, Zexathera said diplomatically. I will arrange for complete access to our databases. Dr. Morthkin will serve as your liaison to explain our more advanced theoretical frameworks. As they walked through the station's corridors toward the research sector, Dr. Chen kept stopping to examine what seemed to be random details. She studied the light fixtures, the wall materials, even the patterns of foot traffic. Her behavior struck Zexathara as oddly primitive, like an animal exploring unfamiliar territory. This is remarkable, Dr. Chen said, running her hand along a corridor wall. This isn't metal or ceramic, is it? It feels almost alive. The station is grown from modified coral organisms, Zexathera explained. They continuously repair and maintain themselves while filtering the atmospheric composition. Much more efficient than mechanical systems. Fascinating. And these light sources? They're biological too? Symbiotic organisms bred for specific wavelength output. Again, far superior to artificial illumination systems. Dr. Chen nodded, making notes in a primitive paper notebook rather than using any kind of electronic device. Her questions seemed random and basic, focusing on infrastructure details that had nothing to do with the helix problem. They arrived at Research Lab Omega, where Dr. Morthkin waited with a holographic display showing the latest helix formation data. The spider-like being gestured with 4 of his arms, causing 3-dimensional equations to rotate in the air. Dr. Chen, these are the fundamental mathematical structures that govern helix formation, he began, his translator converting his clicking sounds into human audible speech. As you can see, the energy density follows a nonlinear progression that creates unstable feedback loops in the quantum foam underlying reality itself. Dr. Chen studied the display intently, her primitive eyes tracking the moving equations. After several minutes, she asked, "What happens if you don't try to stop the formation?" Dr. Morthkin's 8 eyes blinked in confusion. "I beg your pardon? All your models seem focused on preventing or interrupting the helix formation. What if you just let it happen, but control where the energy goes instead?" The question hung in the air like a foreign concept. Zexathera and Dr. Morthkin exchanged glances. In over a century of research, no one had seriously considered simply allowing the destructive phenomenon to occur. The energy released would tear apart local space-time, Dr. Morthkin explained patiently. That is precisely what we are trying to prevent. But energy has to go somewhere, right? It follows conservation laws, even here. What if instead of fighting the formation, you gave it somewhere safe to discharge? It was such a simple question that neither alien immediately knew how to respond. They had been so focused on prevention that they had never seriously considered controlled release. The human was suggesting the equivalent of channeling a lightning bolt rather than trying to stop the storm. For the first time in decades, Zexathara felt a spark of genuine curiosity about the helix problem. Dr. Sarah Chen had been working in Research Lab Omega for 2 weeks, and her presence had begun to disrupt the carefully ordered routine of the Nexus. Unlike the other researchers who worked in silent contemplation or communicated through data streams, The human talked constantly. She asked questions about everything, drew diagrams on physical paper, and even built small physical models using materials she had somehow acquired from the station's fabrication units. Zexathera observed from the lab's upper gallery as Dr. Chen constructed another one of her peculiar three-dimensional models. This one appeared to be made from flexible metal strips arranged in a spiral pattern. The human rotated it in her hands while staring at the holographic display of helix formation data. "Dr. Morthkin," Dr. Chen called out, "can you show me the energy distribution during the formation phase again? But this time, can you slow it down to about 1/10 speed?" The spider-like researcher manipulated the controls, causing the holographic display to replay the catastrophic event in slow motion. Massive spirals of energy rotated in space, growing larger and more violent until reality itself seemed to tear apart. Dr. Chen held up her metal model next to the display. "Look at this," she said. "The energy follows the same pattern as fluid dynamics in a drain. It's like cosmic water going down a bathtub drain, but instead of water, it's space-time itself." "That is an extremely crude analogy," Dr. Morthkin replied, his 8 eyes blinking in what Zexathera recognized as polite confusion. "The mathematical structures involved are far more complex than simple fluid mechanics." "Maybe," Dr. Chen said, still rotating her model. "But sometimes complex problems have simple solutions. On Earth, we've learned that nature often uses the same patterns at different scales. The way water drains from a tub follows the same principles as how hurricanes form, or how galaxies spin." She set down her model and walked to the holographic display, pointing at specific areas with her finger. "Your data shows the helix formations always occur in regions with specific gravitational characteristics, areas where normal space has slight imperfections, like cosmic dents. The gravitational anomalies are well documented," Dr. Morthkin confirmed. "They appear to be prerequisites for helix formation. We theorized they create instabilities in local space-time that allow the phenomenon to manifest." "Right. But what if it's the opposite? What if these aren't random flaws, but more like pressure relief valves? Maybe the universe is designed to have these release points." Professor Yilnara, who had been monitoring from a nearby workstation, slithered over to join the conversation. "Dr. Chen, are you suggesting that helix formation serves some kind of cosmic purpose? That seems highly speculative." The human shrugged, another peculiar gesture her species used to indicate uncertainty. "I don't know about purpose, but look at the pattern. Your data shows that areas where helix formations occur tend to be more stable afterward. The gravitational anomalies are reduced. Space-time in those regions becomes smoother." She walked to another display showing galactic maps marked with helix formation sites. "And these formations aren't random. They follow patterns. They happen in places where gravitational stress has built up over millions of years. It's like the universe is burping." The crude metaphor made Zexathera's patches flicker with something between amusement and annoyance. The human had a talent for reducing elegant cosmic phenomena to biological analogies. "Even if we accept your hypothesis," Professor Yilnara said, "it does not address the fundamental problem. These formations destroy everything in their vicinity. Ships, planets, entire star systems are lost." "That's because you're in the wrong place when it happens," Dr. Chen replied. "What if we could predict exactly where and when a formation will occur? And what if we could redirect the energy somewhere safe?" Dr. Morthkin's legs clicked on the floor as he moved closer. "Redirect? The energy levels involved are beyond anything we can manipulate. A single helix formation releases more energy than our largest stellar engineering projects." Dr. Chen walked back to her makeshift workspace and pulled out one of her paper notebooks. The pages were covered with sketches, equations written in the primitive human mathematical notation, and diagrams that looked more like engineering blueprints than theoretical physics. "I've been analyzing your sensor data from the last 50 formations," she said, flipping through the pages. "The energy doesn't just appear randomly. It builds up over time, following predictable patterns. And once it starts forming the spiral, it follows very specific rules." She opened the notebook to a page covered with hand-drawn curves and calculations. "In human engineering, when you have a system that's building up dangerous pressure, you don't try to stop it. You give it a safe place to release that pressure. We call it a pressure relief valve." "Dr. Chen," Zexathara said, speaking for the first time that day, "are you suggesting we build some kind of device to channel the energy of a helix formation? The engineering requirements would be impossible. No known material could withstand those forces." The human's face broke into another one of those strange smiles. "That's the beauty of it. We don't need to withstand the forces. We just need to redirect them." She walked to the main holographic display and began manipulating the controls, her movements clumsy compared to the elegant gestures used by the alien researchers. But somehow, she managed to call up a three-dimensional workspace and began sketching rough shapes in the air. "Look, your people think in terms of opposing forces, right? When you see a problem, you build something stronger to resist it. But sometimes the smart approach is to work with the forces instead of against them." Her crude shapes began to take form in the hologram. She was drawing what looked like a massive funnel or cone, but with complex, curved internal structures. "In human history, we learned to use water power by building water wheels and dams. We didn't try to stop the river. We redirected its flow to do useful work. What if we could do the same thing with a helix formation?" Dr. Morthkin studied her crude diagram. "You are proposing some kind of collection device? But where would you channel the energy? And how would you anchor such a structure in space?" "You wouldn't anchor it," Dr. Chen replied. "You'd let it move. Make it part of the formation itself." She manipulated the hologram, adding more details to her rough design. "Your data shows that every helix formation follows the same basic pattern. The energy spirals inward, builds up pressure, then explodes outward when space-time can't hold it anymore. But what if we gave it a different path?" The structure she was designing looked almost organic, like a massive flower or perhaps a jellyfish made of metal and energy fields. It had curved petals or sails that seemed designed to catch and channel flowing forces. "I call it a cosmic windmill," Dr. Chen said. "Instead of trying to prevent the formation, we place this device at the exact center where the spiral will form. As the energy spirals inward, it flows through these channels. The device spins with the formation, using the rotational energy to power massive field generators." "Field generators for what purpose?" Professor Yilnara asked, her antenna twitching with interest despite herself. "To open a controlled portal to empty space," Dr. Chen replied. "Somewhere far from any star systems or inhabited worlds. The energy that would normally tear apart local spacetime gets channeled through an artificial wormhole and released harmlessly in the cosmic void." The laboratory fell silent except for the soft humming of the station's biomechanical systems. The three alien scientists stared at the human's crude but surprisingly detailed diagram. "This is..." Dr. Morthkin began, then stopped. His species had no expression for what he was thinking. "Insane?" Dr. Chen suggested helpfully. "Yeah, I get that a lot. But sometimes insane ideas work. The key insight is that you're not fighting the helix formation. You're surfing it." Zexathara's patches began pulsing in a pattern that indicated deep thought. The human's proposal violated every principle of advanced engineering. It was crude, mechanical, and relied on brute force redirection rather than elegant manipulation of fundamental forces. But it might actually work. "Dr. Chen," Zexathara said slowly, "your design assumes we can predict the exact location and timing of helix formations with perfect accuracy." "Already solved that part," the human replied cheerfully. She flipped to another page in her notebook, revealing more hand-drawn charts and calculations. Your people have been thinking of helix formations as random events, but they're not. They follow patterns based on gravitational stress accumulation. She pointed to a series of curves she had drawn. It's like predicting earthquakes, which we've gotten pretty good at on Earth. You map the stress patterns, identify the fault lines, and calculate when the pressure will reach critical levels. I've been running the math on your historical data, and I can predict the next formation with about 97% accuracy. Dr. Morthkin's 8 eyes focused intently on her calculations. The mathematics were primitive by galactic standards, but the underlying logic was sound. The human had identified patterns that had escaped their more sophisticated analysis systems. Where? Zexthara asked. Dr. Chen consulted her notebook. The Kepler 442 system. About 8 months from now. The formation will occur approximately 40 million kilometers from the primary star in the outer asteroid belt. No inhabited worlds, just some mining operations that can be evacuated. You are certain of this? As certain as I can be with the available data. But here's the thing. This gives us a perfect opportunity to test my cosmic windmill idea. If it works, we solve the problem. If it doesn't work, we're no worse off than before. Professor Yilnara's slug-like form rippled with agitation. Dr. Chen, the engineering challenges alone would take decades to solve. Building a device that could survive insertion into a forming helix, constructing field generators powerful enough to open stable wormholes, developing materials that could withstand the rotational forces involved. Actually, the human interrupted, I don't think it would be that hard. Your people already have most of the technology. You've got portable wormhole generators for your transportation networks. You've got field manipulation systems that can reshape matter at the molecular level. You've even got self-assembling construction systems. She gestured to the walls around them. This entire station was grown, not built. You have manufacturing capabilities that can work in any environment. The only thing you're missing is the right design approach. Dr. Chen walked back to her workspace and picked up a different model, this one made from what appeared to be flexible crystal fibers. I spent the last week studying your fabrication systems. They're incredible. You can literally grow a spacecraft from a seed pattern in a matter of days. With the right design, we could have a prototype cosmic windmill ready for testing in a few months. She held up the crystal model, and the light filtering through it created complex patterns on the laboratory walls. The device doesn't have to be perfect on the first try. It just has to prove the concept works. Once we know we can redirect a helix formation safely, we can refine the design for better efficiency. Zexthara found herself studying the human's crude diagrams with growing interest. The approach was completely contrary to everything she had been taught about engineering. It was inelegant, simplistic, and relied on mechanical solutions rather than sophisticated field manipulation. But it addressed the fundamental problem in a way that no one had ever considered. Instead of trying to prevent a cosmic phenomenon, it worked with that phenomenon to redirect its destructive power. Dr. Chen, Zexthara said finally, I believe your proposal merits serious consideration. However, the construction of such a device would require approval from the Engineering Council and the Federation Science Board. The resources involved would be enormous. The human's smile returned. Actually, I think we can build a small-scale prototype right here on the station. Not big enough to handle a real helix formation, but large enough to test the basic principles with controlled energy bursts. She pulled out another notebook, this one filled with technical specifications written in precise detail. I've been working on the design parameters. If we use your biomechanical fabrication systems and integrate them with some of my engineering approaches, we could have a working prototype in about 3 weeks. Dr. Morthkin leaned closer, his interest clearly piqued despite his earlier skepticism. You have been quite busy, Dr. Chen. May I examine your calculations more closely? Of course. Fair warning, though. I write everything in human notation. You might need to convert some of the mathematical expressions. As the alien scientist began reviewing her handwritten notes, Zexathera realized something remarkable was happening. For the first time in over a century, they had a genuinely new approach to the helix problem. Not a refinement of existing theories, not a more sophisticated computational model, but a completely different way of thinking about the challenge. The solution was so simple, so obvious in hindsight, that she wondered how none of them had ever considered it before. Perhaps that was exactly the point. Sometimes it took a completely fresh perspective to see what had been hidden in plain sight all along. The prototype testing chamber hummed with barely contained energy as Dr. Sarah Chen made final adjustments to her scaled-down cosmic windmill. 3 weeks of intensive work had transformed her crude sketches into a functioning device that hovered in the center of the chamber, its biomechanical components gleaming under the artificial starlight. Zexathera watched from the observation deck as the human crawled underneath the device, making what she called last-minute tweaks to the field generators. It was a sight that would have horrified most advanced civilizations. A sentient being physically manipulating dangerous technology with her bare hands instead of using remote manipulation fields. "Dr. Chen," came Dr. Morthkin's voice through the communication system. "The energy buildup is reaching critical levels. You should retreat to a safe distance." "Almost finished," the human called back, her voice muffled by the device's framework. "Just need to adjust the resonance frequency on the tertiary field coils. Your biomechanical components learn and adapt, which is amazing, but they keep trying to optimize for efficiency instead of stability." She emerged from beneath the device, wiping her hands on a cloth. "Okay, I think we're ready. Start the energy injection sequence." The testing chamber had been specially configured to simulate a miniature helix formation. Energy levels that would have powered a small starship were being carefully channeled into a controlled spiral pattern. It was nowhere near the scale of an actual cosmic phenomenon, but it would demonstrate whether the basic principles worked. Professor Yilnara's tentacles manipulated the control interface with practiced precision. Energy injection beginning, initial spiral formation detected, rotation rate increasing as predicted. On the holographic displays surrounding the observation deck, the test formation began to take shape. Streams of energy curved inward, creating a miniature version of the devastating spirals that had plagued the galaxy for generations. "Field generators are responding," reported Dr. Morthkin. "The device is beginning to rotate with the formation. Fascinating. It appears to be stabilizing rather than resisting the energy flow." Dr. Chen pressed her face against the observation window, watching her creation with the intense focus that Zexathera had learned to associate with human concentration. The device spun faster and faster, its curved channels directing the spiraling energy through an increasingly complex pattern. "Portal generation beginning," Professor Yilnara announced. "The artificial wormhole is opening as designed." A tear in space appeared at the center of the device, perfectly circular and stable. Instead of the chaotic ripping that characterized natural helix formations, this opening was smooth and controlled. "Energy redirection is working," Dr. Morthkin said, his 8 eyes blinking rapidly in excitement. 97% of the formation energy is being channeled through the portal. Local space-time distortion is minimal." The test continued for exactly 47 minutes, the predicted duration for a full helix formation cycle. Throughout the entire process, the cosmic windmill spun with increasing speed, capturing and redirecting the energy that would normally have torn apart everything within a 1,000,000-kilometer radius. When the energy finally dissipated, the device came to a gradual stop, its biomechanical components glowing softly with residual power. The testing chamber was completely undamaged. More importantly, the portable sensors they had placed throughout the room showed that space-time had remained stable throughout the entire test. The observation deck fell silent. For over a century, The greatest minds in galactic civilization had tried and failed to solve the helix problem. A human engineer with primitive tools and basic mathematics had just demonstrated a working solution in less than a month. Preliminary test successful, Zexathera announced, her bioluminescent patches pulsing with what she realized was excitement. Dr. Chen, your cosmic windmill concept appears to be viable. The human turned away from the window, her face displaying that peculiar muscular expression her species used to indicate pleasure. It worked even better than I hoped. The biomechanical components actually improved the design during operation. They learned to optimize the field patterns in real time. Dr. Chen, Dr. Morthkin said, I must ask, how did you conceive of this approach? In all our theoretical frameworks, we focused on prevention or containment. Working with the phenomenon rather than against it never occurred to us. The human shrugged, that strange gesture that seemed to accompany most of her explanations. Different way of thinking, I guess. On Earth, we learned early that nature is usually stronger than we are. Instead of fighting it, we try to find ways to work with it. She gestured toward the now quiet device in the chamber. Your people are incredibly advanced. You can manipulate matter at the quantum level, grow living technology, open doorways through space and time. But sometimes you overthink problems. Sometimes the solution is simple mechanical engineering applied in an unexpected way. Over the following months, word of the successful prototype test spread throughout the Federation. The Engineering Council convened emergency sessions to review Dr. Chen's designs. The Federation Science Board allocated unprecedented resources for the construction of a full-scale cosmic windmill. The project became a collaboration unlike any in galactic history. Veltar quantum specialists worked alongside human mechanical engineers. Arachnis computational experts integrated their systems with crude but effective human design principles. Quillian energy manipulation artists found themselves learning from beings who built things with physical tools and manual labor. Dr. Chen moved through the construction facility like a force of nature, examining every component, suggesting modifications, and occasionally picking up tools to make adjustments herself. The sight of a sentient being physically handling construction materials continued to amaze the alien workers, but they had begun to appreciate the directness of the human approach. The field generator array needs to be more robust, she announced during a design review session. In the real thing, we're going to encounter forces we can't simulate here. We need redundancy, backup systems, and the ability to adapt when things don't go according to plan. Engineer Thoxalan, a crystalline being whose people had mastered energy manipulation millennia ago, projected complex mathematical frameworks into the air. Our calculations indicate the current design can handle energy levels 3 times greater than any recorded helix formation. Calculations are great, Dr. Chen replied, but reality has a way of exceeding expectations. In human engineering, we have something called Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong and at the worst possible time. She walked to the holographic display and began modifying the field generator design with her characteristic, crude but effective manipulations. We need backup systems for the backup systems, and manual overrides in case the biomechanical components decide to optimize themselves in ways we didn't anticipate. The construction process took 6 months. The final device was a marvel of hybrid engineering, a kilometer-wide structure that combined the most advanced alien technologies with surprisingly simple human design principles. It looked unlike anything ever built before. Part organic sculpture, part mechanical device, part architectural impossibility. 3 weeks before the predicted helix formation in the Kepler 442 system, the cosmic windmill was transported to the target coordinates. A fleet of Federation ships evacuated the mining operations and established a safe observation perimeter. Dr. Chen stood on the bridge of the command ship Celestial Harmony, watching the final positioning of her device. After months of theoretical work and careful construction, they were about to test her solution against an actual cosmic phenomenon. Gravitational stress patterns are increasing as predicted, reported the ship's science officer. Helix formation will begin within the next 6 hours. Zexthera joined the human at the observation window. Dr. Chen, are you concerned about the test? The human considered the question seriously. A little nervous, sure, but the math checks out, the prototype worked perfectly, and we've built in so many redundancies that even if half the systems fail, it should still work. She paused, looking out at the cosmic windmill floating in the asteroid belt. The funny thing is, your people keep asking me how I thought of this solution. But from a human perspective, it's obvious. When you have a problem with too much energy in the wrong place, you redirect it somewhere safe. It's basic engineering. Yet none of our civilizations considered this approach. Because you're too advanced, Dr. Chen replied. You think in terms of elegant solutions that work with fundamental forces. You manipulate reality at the quantum level. When you see a problem, you try to solve it with sophisticated tools and complex mathematics. She gestured toward the device. Humans are still pretty primitive. When we see a problem, we ask, how can we build something simple that works? We don't care if it's elegant or theoretically perfect. We just want it to do the job. The helix formation began exactly when Dr. Chen had predicted. Space itself seemed to twist as massive energies spiraled inward, following the same catastrophic pattern that had destroyed countless ships and colonies throughout galactic history. But this time was different. The cosmic windmill was positioned at the exact center of the formation, its biomechanical sensors detecting the first stirrings of the cosmic storm. As the energy began to spiral inward, the device came alive. The massive structure began to rotate, its curved channels capturing and directing the inflowing energy. Instead of building to a catastrophic explosion, the helix formation was being tamed, controlled, redirected through carefully designed pathways. Portal generation successful, announced Dr. Morthkin from his position at the sensor array. The artificial wormhole is stable and operational. On the main screen, they could see the cosmic windmill spinning faster and faster, a beautiful and terrible sight as it danced with forces that could tear apart star systems. But it was working. The energy that should have shattered space-time was flowing harmlessly through the portal into empty regions of space millions of light-years away. Energy redirection at 99.3% efficiency, reported Professor Yilnara. Local space-time distortion is within acceptable parameters. The formation lasted for 51 minutes, slightly longer than predicted, but well within the device's operational limits. When it was over, the cosmic windmill came to a gentle stop, its biomechanical components glowing softly with satisfied exhaustion. The Kepler 442 system was completely intact. The mining stations, the asteroid belt, even the delicate gravitational balance of the entire star system remained undisturbed. For the first time in galactic history, a helix formation had occurred without destruction. The command deck erupted in celebration, a mixture of alien sounds and expressions that somehow transcended species barriers to convey shared joy and relief. Dr. Chen, Zexthera said, her bioluminescent patches cycling through patterns of amazement and respect. You have accomplished something that our greatest minds considered impossible. You have solved a problem that has plagued galactic civilization for millennia. The human's reaction was typically understated. She smiled and said, "It was a team effort. I just provided a different way of looking at the problem." But as news of the success spread throughout the galaxy, the impact became clear. The helix problem, the cosmic phenomenon that had limited galactic expansion and threatened entire civilizations, was solved. More importantly, it was solved using an approach that none of the advanced species had ever considered. In the weeks that followed, engineering teams from hundreds of worlds arrived at the Nexus to study the cosmic windmill design. They came not just to learn the technology, but to understand the thinking behind it. Dr. Chen found herself giving presentations to beings whose civilizations had mastered science when Earth was still a ball of molten rock. Yet they listened intently as she explained concepts like redundant systems, fail-safe mechanisms, and designing for the unexpected. The key insight, she told a gathering of the galaxy's greatest engineers, is that sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the most sophisticated one. Sometimes it's the one that works reliably, even when everything else goes wrong. She gestured to a diagram of the cosmic windmill. Your technologies are incredible, far beyond anything we have on Earth. But you can combine that advanced technology with simple engineering principles to create solutions that are both elegant and robust. One of the attending researchers, a gaseous being whose people existed as pure thought patterns, asked, "Dr. Chen, how do humans consistently develop such practical approaches to complex problems?" The human considered the question carefully. "I think it's because we're still pretty new to all this. We haven't had millions of years to develop sophisticated theoretical frameworks. When we encounter a problem, we try the most straightforward solution first." She paused, looking around the room at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. "Plus, we're kind of stubborn. When something doesn't work, we don't usually give up. We try a different approach, then another one, then another one. Sometimes being too primitive to know something is impossible is an advantage." In the months that followed, the cosmic windmill design was refined and improved. Production facilities were established throughout the galaxy to construct devices for placement at predicted helix formation sites. The threat that had haunted galactic civilization for generations became a manageable engineering challenge. But perhaps more importantly, the success sparked a revolution in galactic engineering philosophy. The concept of working with cosmic forces rather than against them led to breakthroughs in faster-than-light travel, stellar engineering, and even the manipulation of black holes. The humans had given the galaxy more than just a solution to the helix problem. They had demonstrated the value of approaching complex challenges with simple, direct thinking. They had shown that sometimes the most advanced civilizations could learn from the newest ones. And in the depths of space, spinning quietly in asteroid belts and cosmic voids throughout the galaxy, cosmic windmills waited patiently for the next helix formation, ready to transform cosmic destruction into controlled energy, turning the universe's most feared phenomenon into just another engineering problem with an elegant, practical solution. Dr. Sarah Chen had returned to Earth, but her impact on galactic civilization would last forever. The galaxy's engineers had been stunned when a human solved their century-old problem, not through advanced mathematics or sophisticated technology, but through simple, practical engineering and the uniquely human ability to find opportunity in the midst of disaster. Perhaps these humans might surprise them after all.